Hello there, I'm the Ever Prince, and welcome to Homebrew Heresy, where we bring your heretical ideas to life in the grim darkness of the 40k universe. Today on Homebrew Heresy, we'll be discussing the Sardaukar from Dune, and how we can bring them into Warhammer 40k. The Sardaukar, for those unaware, are the main military organization of Frank Herbert's Dune franchise. The Sardaukar are incredibly skilled warriors. They originate from the world Slusa Secundus, a military prison world with, to say the least, hellish conditions. Each one is incredibly skilled and extremely deadly. According to some in-universe, they claim that a single Sardaukar is equivalent to 10 regular soldiers. So that should really put into perspective just how deadly these guys are. All this to say, it's pretty obvious why I decided to choose them for the topic of today's homebrew. Of course, before we can start building the Sardaukar, we're going to need to go over their origins and history. So let's get started. Originally, the Sardaukar didn't actually exist as the brutal warrior mercenaries that they are today. Originally, the Sardaukar were simple explorers and settlers of primitive humanity. Unfortunately for these primitive settlers, they would find themselves on the brutal and extremely harsh world of Slusa Secundus, a world that, to put it lightly, has some of the most hostile and brutal conditions imaginable. Seemingly endless rain and brutal winds, terrible conditions, horrible weather, and just endless amounts of pollution. You know, I think they might actually live in Seattle. To add to the similarities, the people on Slusa Secundus are raging cannibals, horrible mercenaries, and brutal criminals. Wait a second. Are we sure that Slusa Secundus isn't just Seattle of the future? Eventually, after managing to survive in their grim and brutal world, the Sardaukar, or as they used to be called, the Sardu people, actually managed to colonize not just our planet, but their entire solar system. So, props on them for that. Unfortunately, they started to realize that they were actually just a small fish in a massive ocean. There were dozens, maybe even hundreds of other celestial empires at the time of the Sardu people. So, realizing very quickly that they couldn't actually challenge any of them, they quickly realized there was only one choice left for them: capitalism. Selling themselves out, they took advantage of the harsh conditions of their homeworld, and using that to sell themselves as harsh mercenaries and devoted warriors and bodyguards. Eventually, they actually began to earn quite a reputation for themselves, with many empires actually unwilling to fight them upon hearing of the brutality and cannibalistic rituals they partake in before and after the battle. Of course, this couldn't stop there, because the Sardaukar would actually begin amassing quite a lot of wealth alongside a vicious reputation. Wealth that they would actually start to take advantage of. Using this wealth in the form of weapons, armor, and even starships, they actually rose up against their former employers, people who looked to the Sardaukar and hoped to use them to pay off and defend themselves. They actually turned against them, conquering their planets and systems entirely. You know, that's a pretty impressive act, I'm not gonna lie, and I gotta respect the hustle. Their leader, the Bershig, would actually go on to become the first empire of the Imperium. Which, when you think about it, yes, GW did steal a lot from Dune, and it's almost not even funny at this point. The Bershig would end up conquering the planet of Corran, which would become the capital of his new empire, and the Sardaukar, who were originally mercenaries, would become the standing army of the Imperium, and would be warriors without equal. Until they fight angry sand people, but, that's at a later point. Alright, so now we've got the origins out of the way, I think it's time we cover the weapons of the Sardaukar. Each Sardaukar is a master of every weapon imaginable, from lasguns to bladed weapons to even some of the most extreme and deadly weapons in the Dune universe. There is nothing that Sardaukar can't use. Not to mention, the Sardaukar have a tendency to actually hide strangle wire inside their braided hair, or conceal poisons under their fingernails. Basically, anything the Sardaukar can do to bring a weapon onto the battlefield, they'll do it. There isn't a single part of their body that they haven't learned to weaponize. As for their armor, all Sardaukar, and basically everyone in the Dune universe, has their own personal energy shield. which should really speak volumes to the degree of power that the Dune universe has over the 40k one. Not to mention the fact that las guns casually cause nuclear explosions, but, you know, I'm just saying. And if you do manage to penetrate their shields, the actual armor of the Sardaukar is actually designed to be void capable, meaning that even in the vacuum of space, the Sardaukar is just as deadly as they would be anywhere else. And that's not even covering their methods of war. Because for the Sardaukar, there's no method that is too grim or too over the top. They're willing to use anything imaginable, from the most grotesque and vile methods of war. Whatever it takes to win, they'll do it. Their methods and reputation are so extreme and so terrifying that upon hearing that a Sardaukar force is actually on its way, it isn't uncommon for some forces to actually just surrender immediately. Though, that usually doesn't stop the Sardaukar from arriving and committing some, light sprinkling of genocide here and there. Alright, so now we've got the origins out of the way, the weapons and the methods of war. I think it's about time that we actually focus on building this homebrew. So, let's start building. Alright, so what are our goals going to be for this homebrew? Well, given our short synopsis of the lore and origin of the Sardaukar, I think it's integral that we have three things. First, our Sardaukar are going to need to be humanity's greatest warriors. After all, in Dune, that's what they are. The chief military force of the Imperium, and almost super soldiers in their own right, feared by almost all for their reputation and their terrible tactics. For our second goal, diversity of combat. Given the fact that a lot of 40k armies have a tendency to stick within their niche, having an army with a lot of diversity, especially in the methods it can bring to battle, is effective and necessary. Especially when you consider the fact that the Sardaukar have a tendency to use infiltration, assassination, and just straight up decimation tactics. So we're going to need something that can cover all those topics at once. And finally, we're going to need a prison planet. Something that really fits Seleucus Secundus, given the fact of how integral it was to the origin of the Sardaukar. After all, if it wasn't for the harsh conditions of that planet, given the fact that it's basically Seattle and Chicago put together, we're going to need a planet that can best fit the lethality and the danger that would create something as awesome and terrifying as a Sardaukar. Alright, so let's see our three major factions: the Imperium, Xenos, and Chaos. And unfortunately, we're going to have to go with the Imperium once again. After all, the Sardaukar, while they can be brutal, they don't exactly fit the methodology of Chaos, given their whole loyalty to the Emperor shtick. And given the fact that there aren't exactly a lot of aliens in the Dune universe, basically none, I don't think that the Sardaukar would best fit as a Xenos faction. Though, I'm sure we could do some fun kit bashing if we were to make them into potentially aspect warriors of some kind. But maybe for another time. Right now, we're going to stick with the Imperium for this kit bash. So, now that we've picked our major faction, it's time for us to go through the sub-factions of what makes the Imperium so special, and which one of those sub-factions would best fit the Sardaukar. Now, for this homebrew, I think it's going to be pretty obvious. We're going to be using Space Marines for this one. Well, initially I did consider using the Astra Militarum, otherwise known as the Imperial Guard. The whole statistic of a single Sardaukar being equivalent to 10 regular soldiers kind of blows a Sardaukar out of the water when it comes to them being guardsmen for this kit bash and homebrew. So, I'm going to have to go with something a bit more potent. Now, I could have also chosen the Custodes, given the fact that the Sardaukar are technically the Emperor's holy bodyguard and the greatest warriors of the universe. But the Custodes aren't exactly from anywhere close to a prison world. Well, yeah, Terra is technically one of the most dangerous places to live, given how compact it is. Several quadrillion people will tend to do that. I didn't think that the Custodes would best fit. After all, we definitely need a Seleucus Secundus to best reflect and fit the theme of the Sardaukar. So, when all is said and done, we're going to have to go with the Space Marines. Starting off, I know for a fact that I wanted these Sardaukar Space Marines to really embody that nature of the Sardaukar, of their ruthless brutality and pragmatism. So, as always, anytime we're going to use Space Marines for a homebrew, it's always important that we choose which of the founding legions we're going to descend from. And when we do have a lot of options, particularly when we bring up the whole infiltrator aspect. After all, we have the Raven Guard, we have the Night Lords even, and the Alpha Legion. I really think the best fit for this chapter would honestly be the Ultramarines. Now, before you raise your arms in protest, hear me out, because I think the theoretical and practical nature of the Ultramarines would really best fit with what we're trying to go for when it comes to building this Sardaukar Legion. I think that the theoretical nature would help them be more open-minded to consider more tactics that would be akin to dishonorable, the subterfuge, the interrogations, the infiltration tactics that the Sardaukar are prone to using. I think that this would best help them, this theoretical and practical nature, on top of the sheer practicality of using their reputation to achieve victory, really does fit with an Ultramarine Gene Seed successor. Now, it should be obvious, but when we choose Space Marines, this basically allows us to succeed in all of our goals at once. They succeed in being super soldiers, as being expected of them, being the whole concept that Space Marines are about proportional to about 1,000 humans worth of manpower. But every part of a Space Marine is also a weapon, given the whole acid spit and everything they have to possess on top of that part. So we can use that. And of course, Space Marines can also recruit from their own homeworlds. And given the fact that there is a precedent for chapters recruiting from prison worlds, I think we can easily say that this chapter, whatever they may be called, recruits from a prison world in and of their own. One very similar to Seleucus Secundus. Alright, so now we've got the basis of our homebrew going, we can actually start building this together and flushing it out to create something a bit interesting. So, without further ado, I present to you the Sardaukar Legion. The Sardaukar Legion are successors of the Ultramarines from an unknown founding. Famed and feared force of Astartes, the Sardaukar Legion strikes fear into the hearts of their enemies, and dread in the eyes of their allies. The brutal prison world of Seleucus Secundus, from which chapter recruits from. Only 6 out of every 13 boys manage to survive to the age of 11. It is these boys that survive the chapter recruits from. These young and lucky neophytes that manage to survive until their 11th name day are taken away by the chapter to be examined, tormented, and tested religiously. Should they pass, they will be taken and made into Space Marines. And those that fail will be abandoned and left for dead. Operating in small kill teams of 5 Astartes, each member is trained and tasked to work alongside his brothers to cover their flanks. Standing back to back, it isn't uncommon for a single squad of Marines to deal with an army that outnumbers them 100-fold. Specialists in dealing with rebel forces and other forms of human contingents, the Sardaukar Legion makes use of their brutal tactics and reputation to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies and force them into compliance. And there you have it. That's the lore on our Sardaukar Legions. As for the design of my Marines, I decided when it came to kit bashing them, I decided to use a very thin layer of silver and white. As for the shoulders, I decided to keep them gold in a way to reflect their relationship to the Imperial throne. As for the helmet, with a very thin dose of modeling clay, I was able to create a helmet that was almost identical to the one seen in the movie. And I didn't have to file away half the helmet like I did for the Master Chief Kit Bash, so that's a positive. As for weapons, I'm gonna give the Sardaukar bladed chainswords. Given the fact that in the movie we do see them with weapons with serrated teeth on them, and I mean, come on, those look exactly like chainswords. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the kit bash and homebrew we've gotten done today. And of course, if you guys have any comments or suggestions, leave them in the comments section below. But feel free to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye.